Today I'm going to try to make a knife out of this piece of flat bar that I have. This is an exceptionally thick piece of flat bar that I have. It's 5/8 inches thick. What I'm going to try to do is just trace a knife shape into it, cut it out using an oxy-acetylene torch, and then using an angle grinder to finish it off. I don't own a forge, so I'm not going to be forging this at all. I'm just going to see if it's possible to just cut one out of a piece of steel and use that as a knife. And I want to see how durable it is without any form of tempering. Because the base material I'm using is so thick, I'm thinking I want to go for kind of like a cleaver. So instead of the blade curving up, I'll be utilizing the thickness of the steel to make something that should be more substantial. But now I'm just going to take an oxy-fuel torch and cut this out and just trace those lines all the way down. I can tell by the weight of this that it's going to be a really nice chopping knife. So now I'm just going to take a grinder and grind off my cut marks until they're all smooth. So I have all of that nice and ground down, nice and flat. Because I don't have a belt sander, I just ended up taking this ruler, placing it up against it to see if it's flush, making sure there's no high spots that I need to grind down further. So now that I have the rough frame of the knife, what I'm going to do is draw lines where I want the bevel to start for the blade, and also grind down the handle so it fits better in the hand. So I have a line traced on both sides. That's where the end of the bevel should end up, and I have a line in the middle to where I want the tip of the blade to be. So I'm going to take a grinder on each side and just keep going until both ends of the grind line up with that bevel mark I made. It took about 2 hours to grind all that, but I finally got it all ground down. I really like the bevel that ended up coming out on this. It took off just a little bit of the corners around the handle. It fits in the hand really nicely. The one problem I'm seeing with the knife is that the blade is really close to the handle, so that if you have to chop something, your hand is kind of in the way of you chopping something long, so you have to make sure it's at the front of the blade, otherwise you're going to smash your hand into it. So to make the knife look more unique, I want to put a pattern into the knife. And what I tried doing with these two pieces of steel that I had welded together is, because there's a seam right there, I took some really thick copper wire, and what I did was I heated up the steel to red hot and melted that copper wire in between that seam. It looks really gross at the beginning because it's not melting at the same temperature as the steel, but it looks really cool at the very end. So something I want to do is grinding marks into the knife and then filling those marks with copper and giving it a nice pattern with that copper. So now that I have the grooves that I want to fill with copper, I have all the lines spaced 1/2 inch apart and angled at a 45 degrees towards the front. Now I just have to take the long process of heating this up red hot and then progressively adding the copper wire. Luckily I know where a steel recycling place is, so I have access to copper wire. Now that I have all that copper wire melted into the grooves that I made, I'm going to let this cool down for a while. Once it's cooled down colder than about 200 degrees, then I'll go to work using a flap disc and grinding away all that copper. I don't want to grind anywhere past the surface of the steel. I just want to remove all the excess copper from the material. This turned out way better than I thought it was originally going to. I ground off all the scale. I kind of wanted to leave the scale as well as have the copper, but the only way to get the copper to show the nice lines is to grind off all the scale as well. Unless I had started with grinding off the scale to begin with before putting the grind marks for the copper. But I think I really like the way this turned out. The last step I have is to give a final sharpen to the blade and test it out. I wonder how much bigger I could make one, as long as I have the time. I think I have an idea.